The void between stars is not silent. It thrums with the echoes of civilizations, with the whispers of stellar winds, and the deep resonant hum of the galactic chorus, the combined data streams and communications of 1,000 federated species. In this chorus, the story of a species is told not by their wars or their art, but by their foundational technology. Their keystone. The Nine Thrall hegemony understood this. Their keystone was the gravity spire, a mastery of mass manipulation that allowed them to build cities that spiraled into clouds and ships that could turn a planet's own weight against it. They were architects of worlds, patient and deliberate. To them, a civilization's worth was measured by the elegance and stability of its principal technology. The Voran Collective, a swarm of insectoid tacticians, prized the quantum entanglement lance. Instantaneous, unstoppable communication and energy transfer across light years. Their society was a single unified mind across star systems, their warfare a perfect, synchronized ballet of destruction. Speed and connection were their metrics of progress. And then there was Earth. Sol 3. Humanity. They arrived late to the galactic stage, their first FTL drives crude, sputtering things that ripped through subspace like a torn canvas. The Galactics observed them with a mixture of pity and mild interest. The humans were chaotic. Adapters, scavengers, bricoleurs. They had no singular keystone. They used repurposed 9 Thrall mass drivers for mining, licensed Voran comm relays, Klaxon plasma blades for cutting, and Felinid biografts for medicine. They were a species of duct tape and stubbornness, patching together a place in a universe that had already written its rules. Their military was a particular joke. The United Terran Accords Navy was a hodgepodge of purchased decommissioned hulls and locally produced frames that were blocky, unaerodynamic, and festooned with an absurd variety of weapon mounts, particle beams, missile pods, chemical projectile cannons. It was inelegant. It was wasteful. It was, to the refined sensibilities of the hegemony or the cold logic of the collective, primitive. Whispers emerged from trade outposts and observation posts along the Terran border. The humans were working on a new project. A weapon. They called it a magnetic acceleration system. The engineers who heard the specs smiled, mandibles clicking in amusement. A weapon that used electromagnetic coils to propel a solid slug? At a fraction of light speed? Preposterous. The energy requirements would be catastrophic, the recoil would shatter any mounting ship, and the barrel would liquefy after a single shot. It was a child's fantasy, a physics nightmare. The official Galactic assessment, filed under Terran Quaintnesses, read, "The proposed railgun technology is a theoretical dead end. Humanity's fascination with kinetic impact weaponry is a cultural anachronism, a clinging to their ballistic past. No one believes they have achieved, or can ever achieve, a functional large-scale model. It is considered a harmless delusion of grandeur." The file was closed. The galaxy moved on. But in the dark between stars, near a barren moon designated Tantalus 13, the humans were silent. And they were loading a tungsten alloy rod, 20 meters long, into a smooth, cold barrel that gleamed under the distant sun. Rising conflict. Admiral Kthar of the 9 Thrall hegemony observed the Terran defensive line from the bridge of the World Shaper. His ship was a masterpiece of gray, flowing architecture, like a mountain carved into a vessel. It hummed with the deep, stable power of a contained singularity. "They still hold the Lagrange point," his tactical officer droned. "Their formation is disjointed. The lead cruiser, the UTS Resolute, is a modified Voran frigate from 3 generations ago. Its shield harmonics are inconsistent. Kthar's massive, stony head tilted. The conflict over Tantalus 13 was a minor border dispute. A human mining consortium had accidentally broken through a crust layer into a network of ancient 9 Thrall geotemple spires. A cultural affront. The hegemony had merely deployed a single battle group to enforce a quarantine and demand reparations. Standard procedure. The humans had responded by sending their entire Third Fleet. It was an overreaction, typical of their emotional species. "Hail them again," Kthar rumbled, his voice like grinding consonants. On the view screen, the face of the human commander appeared. Captain Alistair Vance. His face was lined, his eyes holding a weariness that Kthar misread as fear. "Captain Vance. Your continued presence defies hegemonic law. Your vessels are outmatched. Your technology is disparate. Withdraw. Submit your species to arbitration." This need not end in ash. Vance's lips tightened into a thin line. The spires were unmapped and uninhabited, Admiral. We've offered to seal the breach and fund a joint archaeological survey. We're not withdrawing from sovereign Terran-claimed space. Kthar felt a pang of genuine confusion. Sovereignty? Captain, you patch your ships together from scrap. You fight with weapons that belong in museums. What you claim is not sovereignty. It is stubbornness. Look at your flagship. He gestured, and a magnified image of the Resolute appeared. It was indeed an old Voran Stinger class, but humans had welded additional armor plates to its sides, bolted on missile pods of a different design, and mounted a large blocky spinal weapon that was conspicuously plain, a dull gray cylinder with no visible firing aperture or energy coils. You have attached what is that? A cargo container to your spine? Is this your famed railgun? A faint, tired smile touched Vance's face. Something like that. A bluff, Kthar stated, not to Vance, but to his own bridge crew. A ripple of subsonic laughter moved through the nine thrall. Very well. We shall demonstrate the difference between a true keystone and a prop. Target the Resolute's engine block. Gravity shear beam. Minimal power. We will cripple, not destroy. Let them be towed home in shame. On the Voran Command Hive ship Swift Conclusion, Overseer XIX watched the same exchange through a million linked senses. The Voran were present as observers, under treaty with the hegemony. To XX, the human fleet was a fascinating study in inefficiency. Their communications were encrypted radio waves, slow and easily intercepted. Their movements were individual, not hive-linked. A delay of 1.3 seconds between the lead ship issuing an order and the wing ships reacting. An eternity in modern warfare. Assessment: Terran force poses negligible threat, XIX pulse to the collective. Asterisk: their tactical disadvantage is total. Their alleged superweapon is a null data point. Probability of functional deployment, 0.00034%. Recommend observation cease. Resources better allocated to monitoring Thraxian nebula migrations. Asterisk. But something made XIX linger. A tiny anomaly. The power readings from the human fleet were wrong. They were too stable. The Resolute, a ship of that class, should have a primary power signature spiking with weapon charges, shield cycles. Its signature was a flat, unwavering line, humming at a consistent massive output. As if all its systems were idle, and its entire gargantuan reactor was feeding one single dormant system. Curious. Human response. Aboard the UTS Resolute, the air was cold, smelling of ozone, sweat, and a strange metallic tang. Captain Vance turned from the screen, the image of the smug nine-thrall admiral dissolving. Report, he said, his voice calm in the red-lit bridge. Gravity shear beam charging. Bearing direct. Impact in 45 seconds, Tactical Officer Singh announced, her fingers dancing over her console. Shields at maximum, but sir, they're specs. Our shields might as well be paper. Understood. Helm, bring us about to heading 000, Mark 0. Put our nose right on that world shaper. Sir. The helmsman, a young lieutenant from Mars, looked back, eyes wide. You heard me. Straight at them. All ahead flank, emergency power to engines. The order rippled through the fleet. The disjointed, clumsy-looking Terran ships suddenly pivoted as one, not in a graceful arc, but a brutal fuel-burning hard turn. They formed a spearhead, with the Resolute at its tip, pointing directly at the heart of the nine-thrall formation. On the world shaper, Kthar blinked slowly. Suicidal charge? An attempt to ram? How barbarically literal. All batteries, free fire. Swat them down. Ionized plasma and lances of gravitic force began to streak across the void. A Terran destroyer, the Valiant, took a direct hit to its port side. Its shields flared and died, armor vaporized. It vented atmosphere in a silent, glittering cloud, spinning away, crippled. Valiant is out of the fight. Casualties reported. The call came over the comms, tight with pain. Vance's jaw clenched. Hold course. Do not return fire. Not yet. Impact in 20 seconds. Singh yelled. Another ship, a frigate, vanished in a silent flash of light, pulverized by a gravity implosion charge. 19. Aboard the swift conclusion, observed the losses. Irrational. Sacrificial. No tactical gain. Unless. The hive mind focused on the Resolute. Its power signature remained that unsettling, flat line. And it was. Accelerating. Fast. Too fast for its class. Admiral. The human flagship is accelerating beyond its rated limits. Structural integrity must be failing. Desperation, Kthar snorted. Focus fire on the Resolute. Disable it now. A torrent of energy converged on the human ship. Its shields flared, a brilliant dying sapphire against the black. They flickered, strained, and then collapsed. Shields are down. Hull breach on decks 5 through 7. Contained. The Resolute shuddered violently. Alarms blared. Vance was thrown against his command chair, a strap cutting into his shoulder. Captain. The main gun is reporting optimal charge. Solution is locked. They're in the basket. Singh's voice was a blade of cold steel amidst the chaos. Vance looked at the main screen. The World Shaper filled their view, immense and arrogant. He thought of the crews on the Valiant, the lives already lost over a misunderstanding and pride. He thought of the engineers who had worked themselves to death in zero-G shipyards to make the impossible work. He thought of his daughter, back on Luna, who believed her dad was keeping the peace. Sound general quarters. Record for all decks and all ships. He pressed a button, and his voice echoed through the battered, bleeding ship. All hands, this is the captain. You've trained for this. You've sacrificed for this. They think we're primitive. They think our technology is a joke. They don't believe we have it. He paused, his eyes on the enemy flagship. Let's show them they're wrong. Gunner, fire the Mjolnir. Climax. Deep within the bowels of the Resolute, in a chamber shielded by meters of lead and superconductive alloy, a sequence finalized. The cargo container on the ship's spine was no container. It was a housing. Along its length, a series of hyperconductive coils, cooled to near absolute zero by helium baths, sequenced to life. The power from the ship's twin fusion reactors, power that had been siphoned, stored, and stabilized in capacitors the size of skyscrapers, began to flow. There was no roar. No brilliant charge-up beam. Just a deep subauditory thrum that vibrated through the entire frame of the Resolute, a sound felt in the bones, not the ears. On the bridge, a single simple light on Singh's panel turned from red to solid, unwavering green. She pressed the physical trigger, a red button under a locked cover. The event was too fast for light to properly document. First, a flash of vaporized metal from the muzzle brake as the air in the barrel was instantaneously turned to plasma. Then the tungsten projectile, dubbed the penetrator, was subjected to forces that defied imagination. Electromagnetic fields of staggering strength pulsed along the coil sequence, accelerating the slug down the 20-meter barrel in milliseconds. When it left the barrel, it was moving at 0.15 c. 15% of the speed of light. The recoil was catastrophic. The entire Resolute, a ship massing hundreds of thousands of tons, was slammed backwards as if hit by a god's hammer. Its forward momentum was obliterated. Structural members groaned and buckled. Every crew member not strapped down was thrown into walls, consoles. The sound was a deafening metallic scream of protesting metal. But that was nothing compared to what happened next. The projectile was invisible. It was a streak of nothing, a line of erased reality. It did not glow. It did not radiate. It simply was. On the World Shaper, the tactical officer had just begun to say, "The human vessel has fired some." Kind of, when the port side of the ship ceased to exist. There was no impact. There was a replacement. The projectile, carrying kinetic energy equivalent to a small nuclear warhead, punched through the hegemony ship's multi-layered gravitic shields as if they weren't there. Shields designed to deflect energy and diffuse mass were useless against a singularity of kinetic force moving at relativistic speeds. The tungsten rods struck the armored hull. The molecular bonds of the armor, the decks, the crew, the power conduits, all of it was overmatched. Matter was not pierced, it was displaced. Vaporized into an expanding cone of superheated plasma that blew out the other side of the ship a microsecond later. The World Shaper was not holed. A perfect cylindrical tunnel 20 meters wide was carved from its port engine nacelle straight through to its starboard communications array, exiting in a plume of incandescent debris. For a second, the ship hung there, silent. Then, secondary explosions began. Conduits of stabilized gravity ruptured, creating localized fields of crushing, twisting force. The elegant spiral architecture collapsed in on itself, torn apart by its own failing keystone technology. The world shaper, pride of the hegemony, broke into 3 massive pieces, each vomiting fire and fragments into the vacuum. The silence on the Resolute's bridge was absolute, save for the blare of damage alarms. The crew stared at the viewscreen, their faces illuminated by the silent, spreading fireball of the enemy flagship. On the Voron hive ship's swift conclusion, Overseer XX experienced something entirely new, a system-wide shock so profound it temporarily fragmented the local hive link. Every sensor had recorded the event. The data was analyzed, reanalyzed, and found to be physically impossible, yet it had happened. No energy weapon. Pure kinetics. Relativistic velocity. Shield penetration, total. Armor penetration, total. Recoil, catastrophic, but managed. They absorbed the recoil through their own hull. They used their ship as a sacrificial anvil. The implications flooded 19's consciousness, cold and terrifying. This was not a fancy energy beam. It was not a complex quantum state. It was the oldest principle in the universe: move a thing very fast, and hit another thing with it. The humans had not found a new, elegant keystone. They had taken a fundamental truth and, through sheer brutal engineering will, pushed it to an apocalyptic extreme. They had looked at the equation of kinetic energy and decided to solve for obliteration. The remaining 9 Thrall ships, their command link shattered, froze in confusion. Their tactical doctrine had no response for this. Their admiral, their gravity spires, their entire philosophy of stable mass-based power was gone. Erased in a flash of vaporized metal. Captain Vance, coughing in the smoke-filled bridge, gripped his chair. Status of the Mjolnir. Coil array 1 through 7 are fused. Capacitor banks are drained. The barrel is a write-off, sir. It's warped. We cannot fire again for at least 72 hours. Singh reported, her voice hollow. Vance nodded. He keyed the fleet-wide comm, his voice rough. All Terran vessels. The enemy command ship is neutralized. Do not pursue. Do not fire unless fired upon. Form a defensive screen around the Resolute. Send all medical and SAR to the Valiant and the Courageous. He then opened a channel to the remaining 9 Thrall ships and the Voron Observer. This is Captain Vance of the UTS Resolute. The hegemony's flagship has been destroyed. This engagement is over. We will hold our position. We will tend to our wounded. Any further aggressive action will be met with decisive force. The offer for a joint archaeological survey remains. The choice is now yours. Resolution. The aftermath was not a celebration. It was a somber, chilling tableau. The Voron swift conclusion slowly moved forward, not in an attack posture, but in a cautious, respectful approach. Overseer XIX opened a direct channel, audio only. The hive mind's voice was a synthesized chorus, but the usual condescension was gone, replaced by a stark, analytical awe. Captain Vance. We have observed. We have calculated. Your weapon, it should not function. Vance, wiping blood from a cut on his forehead, responded wearily. Our chief engineer has a saying, Overseer. Shouldn't work is not the same as doesn't work. We just made it work. At great cost to your vessel. You are crippled. We're still here, Vance said simply. That phrase echoed in 19's mind. Still here. The humans had taken a catastrophic recoil, damaged their own ship irreparably, to deliver a single war-ending blow. They had used themselves as the counterweight. It was not elegant. It was not stable. It was violent, wasteful, and devastatingly effective. It was a statement written in tungsten and fire: we will break our own bones to break your will. The remaining 9 Thrall ships, after a tense hour, powered down their weapons. A single, smaller shuttle broke away from the wreckage of the World Shaper, carrying the surviving second-in-command. It requested, in a tone of shattered pride, a parley. In the following days, As SAR crews from both sides worked to recover bodies from the wreckage, the truth of the railgun settled over the sector like cosmic dust. The galaxy had been wrong. Humanity did have a keystone. It was not a single elegant piece of technology. It was a principle. A terrifying, relentless principle, the application of focused violence. They didn't master gravity or quantum states. They mastered consequence. They saw a problem, in this case, an impregnable shield, an invincible hull, and they did not seek to outsmart its physics. They sought to overwhelm it with a force so basic, so profound, that the physics had to yield. They turned Newton's laws into a weapon of apocalypse. And the most frightening part? They had fired one. Just one. And everything, the battle, the hegemony superiority, the galaxy's understanding of Terran potential, had ended. The news spread through the galactic chorus, not as a data stream, but as a seismic shockwave. Species who had dismissed humanity as traitors, mercenaries, or scavengers now looked at their blocky ships and saw not clumsiness, but a terrifying modularity. They saw the missile pods, the point defense guns, the laser batteries not as a lack of focus, but as a layered complementary suite of tools, with one ultimate universe-breaking tool held in reserve. The Terran Accord did not gloat. They signed the Joint Survey Treaty. They helped tow the 9 Thrall wrecks. Captain Vance visited the wounded of both sides in the infirmary. As the Resolute, under heavy tow, began its long limping journey back to the shipyards of Mars, Overseer XX filed the final report to the Voron Collective. It was only 3 lines, a stark departure from their usual exhaustive analysis. Re-evaluation of species, Homo sapiens, Terran. Primary keystone identified, the will to forge a singular solution, regardless of cost. Threat assessment, maximum. Not for their weapon. For the mind that conceived it. A mind that looks at the impossible and asks, how much energy will it take to make it possible? And then finds the answer. From that day forward, when a human engineer said, I have an idea, a silence would fall. A respectful, fearful silence. For the galaxy had learned that a human idea, forged in stubbornness and powered by sheer, undiluted will, could carve a hole through the flagship of an empire, and through the very assumptions upon which that empire was built. They had believed humanity harmless, primitive, and fragmented. They were wrong. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human.